gentlemen, firstly, what a great opening keynote that was from Mark. And right now we're in our product panel discussion, which is going to be the opening panel discussion right now at the World OTT Show. Well, we're looking at talking about OTT product and user experience. What makes your OTT platform great for your users? We're looking at talking about data-powered media and entertainment industry, predictive and prescriptive analytics for improved customer engagement, importance of user profiling and personalization, compatibility with multiple devices, and content planning. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we're elated to be joined by our esteemed speakers. First up, Andreas Maltzahn, the co-founder, iwonder Singapore, joining us. Well, Andreas has 15 plus years of experience in telecom, media, technology, and over 10 years in strategy consultant. He's worked in over 25 developed and emerging markets in Europe, Asia, Middle East, and Africa, to name a few. Thank you so much, Andreas, for joining us live today at the World OTT Show. Also joining, thank you, Andreas. All right, and thanks. Pleasure having you, Andreas. Also joining is Lokesh Chauhan, the Chief Technology Officer, Eros Now India, joining us. Well, Lokesh is a technocrat and a thought leader experienced in strategic planning, product scoping, team building, and scaling with architecture decisions. He's currently the CTO at Eros Now in India. Thank you so much, Lokesh, for joining us live today.
Hey, good morning.
Good morning. Also joining these esteemed panelists, we do have Anusik Pagare, the Head Marketing and Content, Asia Pacific, VMAS Infotainment Pvt.Ltd, Singapore, joining us. Well, an experienced director with a demonstrated history of working in the entertainment industry, somebody who's skilled in marketing management, market planning, advertising, market research, and brand management. Thank you so much for joining us, Anusik.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much.
Pleasure having you on board.
Morning, everybody.
Good morning. Also, we do have Thomas Peterson, AVP, Head of Product and Customer Experience, ABS-CBN Australia, joining us. Well, Thomas has worked in the digital arena for 10 years, which includes agencies, enterprises, consulting, and startups. He has good success while operating in a number of roles that are all about delivering value to the end customer. Thank you so much, Thomas, for joining us today.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
Pleasure is all ours. We also have, ladies and gentlemen, introducing you to the moderator of the panel discussion. We have Shabir Momin joining us, the MD and CTO, Zenga TV Singapore, joining us. Well, Shabir has had a successful business record at CXO level before he became an entrepreneur. He has sold few ventures in the past, and his current venture that has been founded and co-founded are Zenga TV, One Digital Entertainment, a digital content company, One AXS.com, amongst others. Thank you so much, Shabir, for joining us live today. Shabir, you're on mute. We just request you to unmute yourself, please.
Thank you, Bhavna. Hi, everybody. Good morning.
Pleasure. So, ladies and gentlemen, with this, we have our esteemed set of panelists on your stage and screen. I now leave it in the able hands of Shabir, who's our moderator, to take forth with his panel discussion. Over to you, Shabir.
Thank you, Bhavna. Hi, everybody. I would like to do a quick 30-second introduction for each from a quick background point of view, that experience point of view for each of these guys, so that we can then move forward so that we can set context here. So Andreas comes with experience on product side, on customer growth and planning side, and he would give us some good insight on a very new dimension of how you're looking at an OTT service provider. Lokesh is a technology guy, and he will debate with us on what's the right direction to go and which format and which direction and challenges in that space. Similarly, Thomas will give us a lot of information on about data analytics and other aspects. Anusik will give us some information about content and how the creative side and the growth side and what's happening on the SVOD side and stuff like that. So while we are going ahead with this great panel that we have, let us start with Thomas. I would do one round of question with all of you, which is going to be a common question first, and then we will go into more specific question. So my first question is more around what in your mind is first to get it right, or where would you put your first bet on? Is it technology or is it content? Which one do you invest more on, or which one is the first preference that you have? And once you get that, obviously you need both to survive, but which one do you put your bigger bets on, and which one do you start with, and how do you take it from there? Thomas.
It's a good question and a hard one. I think it's a vexed question. My experience has been the pendulum tends to swing back and forth. But if it was myself starting out again on a journey, I would be putting the money behind content based on my experience where users have and continue to jump through enormous hurdles in order to watch the content, and through piracy and through other infrastructure hurdles. They will come and put up with enormous friction in order to watch that content, to be part of a conversation, to be part of joining that community when the content is special and popular. But if we invested in the technology and we didn't have the content, then we have a proof of concept, we don't have a product. So I would start with content, but obviously, as you say, we need both.
Okay. Andreas, what's your thought?
Well, I'd even go one step up first in order to answer the question, which is to be really clear on who are you building your product and serving your content for? Because there's so many options already out there. And if you just get another Me Too thing out there, it's just not going to get any traction. So it's, I think, all starting first with, why should you exist? Who is your product for? And hence, what problem are you trying to solve? And is that a problem that is a technology or product problem, or is it you just can't get the content that you want to watch? And once you're clearer on in the particular range of content that you're focusing on, what your particular problem or challenges that you're trying to solve, then you can better answer that question. Off the back of it, I'd say, for most services, there's certainly a minimum product and tech that you need to have in place that customers expect, as a minimum for you to offer. So that's the first thing you need to have. But then to Thomas's point, I'd say you really need to make sure you have the content that people want before, again, going back into making sure your product is as amazing as your customers expect it.
Yeah, that's a very nice point both of you guys made. In fact, you like Thomas said, you have to keep switching like a pendulum between the two. But all of us always come with a mindset, right? So, some come with a, like for example, I've seen media companies which convert into a platform are always media first. And there, a CTO like Lokesh will have a challenge because he's just going to struggle and keep pushing, because everybody, the organization that he's now trying to make a platform out of is going to keep pushing him and saying, we know it all, just do your tech job and we'll figure it out. Whereas they are content heavy from the very beginning because their focus is content. And sometimes it's just the other way around. I don't know what Lokesh is facing. Sometimes because they know everything on media, everything on content, but that's already been there, done that, right? And what's new for them is technology. So someone like a Lokesh will be welcomed with the red carpet and will be treated like a king because he's the one who's going to change the world for these guys now. So what is it, Lokesh? Where do you fit it? Are you being welcomed by a red carpet, or are you sitting in one small corner storeroom where everybody is saying, we know it all and you just do your job?
Actually, it's a little bit of both. It's an areas I'm the guy who is going to be valued for his opinions and his, what you would say, out of the box thought process on specifically how we intend to interact with the user base with the pre-existing cache of media that we have, produced over decades. Whereas in certain scenarios, it's like we know and we can identify what works for us. The gap that we are trying to bridge is we're going to bring in a better platform, a better understanding of how user interactions, and essentially a sense of data. So all the, what you would say, knowledge is theoretical and based on experience and cannot be directly applied on what works, unless you basically comb it with a very, very sharp, what you'd say, tool, siphoning through all the noise and data and say, this is what my inferences are for this specific type of content. That's the way we should go forward.
Okay.
Otherwise, it's going to just be an ego tussle between a bunch of people who all are experienced, who all understand how to run a media business or run how to identify right stories to create content.
And it will be a stupid question to ask you, media first or content first, because I kind of know the obvious answer, but I'll still anyways ask you. What do you think is first, media first or content first?
Oh, I think you got confused. Both are the same, right? Media and content. You want me to
Sorry, I mean
prioritize
technology
technology?
first, content first, right? Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah. Technology first always. What people will produce content, and they're just going to be taken over by pirates, and people will be watching it over torrents. Like,
yeah, so I knew the obvious answer. Good. So, Anusik, what in your mind is the first that comes? I mean, where do you put your first money, and what do you want to sort first before you get going? Or even if you are in the middle of a journey of a platform, what do you feel is important to sort first? Is it the technology or the content?
For me, it's both are important, but if you ask me, content is much more. I'll pump on the money on content because nowadays it's very much easy. Digitalizations, the customer usually, if he don't like the content, he can hop to other platform. So content in the major thing I think so that will fulfill my purpose of getting the subscription or the audience on my platform and engage the audience too.
Yeah, my answer is also going to be very similar and obvious as what Lokesh's would be, because I'm a technology guy at heart first, and then media and business guy much later. When I started off, I looked at it from a very different prism at that point of time, because we are like a 13-year-old OTT platform. So, I mean, the OTT platform that we have as one of the businesses. What we thought was that time the technology was a big struggle. Like what Anusik said, it's not a big challenge today, but that time it was a big, I mean, having an OTT platform itself was a breakthrough. Today, it's very easy piece of cake. You just go to 2 service providers and click few buttons and you're up and ready and going. So that time we used to see, we had challenges like, do you want to first make the platform work? Second is make the video work. Third is make sure that it's continuously working and not buffering. And then it is not pixelated. And then comes content, because you're not even able to see the top rated movie star or the movie that you're trying to show people because it's not visible. I mean, you're blocking, waiting, buffering, invisible. If you're showing a cricket match, the wickets are not visible. So those were the challenges. But in today's time, we're talking 2K, 4K, high speed delivery, very quick delivery, and so many other aspects, right? And they all happen in such a quick. Now, but at the back end, to run a large operation like that, and when we touched upon the content side and the technology side, both needs a lot of money, right? To be premium. I mean, the premium content costs you an arm, and on the other hand, the premium technology costs you an arm. Sometimes you compromise one for the other to see if I'm doing more on right, or then you do a little less on the left. So you need to make money. I mean, that's the end goal, to be able to build a platform and run it successfully. What do you guys bet on? I mean, it is AVOD or SVOD?
Just one thought on that as well. I think in terms of these trade-offs, I think you could kind of almost say, 50% content, 50% is tech. But if you only focus on one of them and neglect the other, you multiply them together and the value is 25%. And it's only when you really have both working to delight customers do you get the full 100%. And I think that's important, because like you mentioned, there are people that come very much from the content or media background, and they neglect the technology, and then the product suffers and then customers suffer. And the other way around, those that come too much from the technology angle and algorithms and everything has to be, recommended to this and that, might also miss the boat in terms of what customers ultimately want. So it's kind of, getting really the balance of that to get the 100% of value.
I think the way I look at it is the technology needs to keep evolving. So it's almost like a 6-monthly or an annual cycle. While you are working at the back end, but you're doing new releases on technology once in every 6 months or 1 year, right? Whereas content is a more constant thing. It's an every day, every week, every month, every quarter. So content is something you're continuously investing on, but you have those tent poles, right? In technology, you're investing for such a long period, and then you're suddenly launching a new version. And obviously, you need to make sure that it adds a lot more convenience and all of that. But at the same time, content is a much more regular thing, but you still have to invest, right? I mean, for example, if somebody is going and buying, let's say, cricket rights, that's a one-time right purchase for a certain series, but it's expensive. Similarly, if you go and buy a block of blockbuster movies, it's an expensive block, and you really need to juice it out to be able to create value out of for the customers. But coming to monetization part, which while I agree that we'll have to keep swinging between technology and all that, and it's very natural, a tech guy will always go more, vote more for the tech guys, and the content guys will always go and say it's content first. So this is a chicken and egg story which will go on. Moving to monetization, what do you guys feel is the right way, or is there a third way that's possible? We already know subscription-driven revenue, advertisement-driven revenue. Is there a third opportunity to make money as well? I mean, I've heard rumors, someone coming who's saying, I don't want revenue from you. I will pay my customers to watch my content. I mean, do you think things like that will be as crazy? Because when we launched 13 years back, and we launched an ad-driven model, everybody was surprised because only thing that was known to the world at that point of time was subscription model. Nobody knew what an ad-driven model was. We were the first guys to do that. But now, both of them have their own merits and demerits, right? So what do you think we should go first, Thomas?
Well, I think different markets suit different models. I think different users suit different models. And I think, we're talking about emerging markets primarily here. And I think my preference is around access and ubiquity, and to lower the barriers of entry against piracy and against other channels where you don't get any revenue. However, SVOD, whilst being, I think, more traditional in VOD, is an easier model to run technically and financially versus AVOD. I think AVOD is an infinitely harder model to get right, but it provides more levers in order to maximize that viewer and to maximize the clip of that viewer. And obviously, the more consumption, the more money, versus SVOD, the more consumption, the less money you make with CDN and infrastructure costs. So I think there's no really right answer as a broad statement or a broad question. It comes down to the market and to the demographic. But we run a blended model. We have AVOD, TVOD, and SVOD. And we then have a challenge around windowing and how the content moves through these different tiers based on the market and based on the segments that we're targeting.
And do you feel like you're running 3 different companies with 3 different models, or do you still feel it's one product, one company, one solution? Is just the 3 different access levels? I mean, is the product experience from a user point of view that if I don't want to watch an ad, I'm willing to pay for it as a subscription? Is that the switch, or it's totally different, 3 different products? You come from one different door and you never get to go to the other door.
No, it doesn't feel like 3 different businesses. It feels that we think about 3 different tiers, and that is an internal language and it's common parlance, tiers. But it becomes a challenge where different, a tentpole, how we best monetize it when we don't necessarily, we're not going to necessarily launch it on the OTT platform alone. If it's going to be launched in cinemas or launched in other platforms at the same time, then we need there to be some parity in experience. So a cinema experience and TVOD are often connected, where if it's free to air on broadcast, it's free on the AVOD. So it becomes obviously more management, more content windowing, more rights management overhead. If you just run SVOD, it's a simpler way to go.
Yeah. Okay. Andreas, what's your thought? What should, I mean, obviously you have a certain kind of a product. So how do you see the world? Do you see it more SVOD or AVOD or any other new WOD that you want to create?
Well, it's a great question, and to be honest, it's a really tricky one, and it's why you see so many experiments. I completely agree with Thomas. You need to, I guess, first do your research and understanding again of, you know, what are you building for whom, and again, who is that target audience. Because again, that will inform it. And secondly, you need to look at your market dynamics. Many of the markets we are looking at, and you know, iwonder is live across Southeast Asia, but also Australia and New Zealand, which are obviously very developed markets, and coming to India very soon. So watch this space. But what we see is that in Australia, for instance, our CPMs are very high because we do some of our titles with B2B partners in an AVOD type setting. And here, then it can actually be interesting for our partners and for us. In other markets where the CPMs are 5% of Australia or 10% of that level, that's perfectly fine. But then, you know, you just need to look at your cost structures again and see, well, does that work? And so I think understanding obviously all those dynamics of, you know, your market, the customer's appetite, but also the monetization of it differs so much between emerging markets and developed ones that for me, I think SVOD can be successful anywhere. AVOD, I think, is easier in developed markets where you have the CPMs to support your cost structures in a bigger way, at least as it currently stands. I'd say that'd be my
in my quick opinion is SVOD is much easier provided you are in the right market and you have the right focus on the content, because you are then in that one track, right? You're not trying to dabble with too many things. But if you really want to take a challenging market, and obviously it gives you better fruit because of that, even though it's a little inconsistent, is the AVOD model, where you're not only dabbling on one side on content, you're also dabbling on technology. And then now you have a new animal that you have to deal with, which is the brand side of it, where you need to keep having a pipeline of brands who are willing to keep sponsoring you, keep paying you, and you have to dig that well every day to find a new set of water for you, right? So it's dabbling with three challenges. So it's more challenging, but it also is more rewarding compared to the SVOD is. Lokesh, what's your thought?
So I'm primarily with both Thomas and Andreas on that one. And they've covered the whole spectrum, except for where I would say one thing, in a lot of developing markets, we see bundling with carriers, see a lot of traction for us. Bundling and direct carrier billing in itself opens up a larger payment avenue, because a lot of these geographies do not have a fundamental concept of digital payment available to people. So markets in Africa, Middle East, a lot of these places, it makes a lot more sense to allow carrier billing to be your, what you would say, easy entry point for people to pay for the content.
Got it. No, but isn't that how India was a few years back, where pretty much everything used to funnel down through the mobile operators, and they were like the gatekeepers for everything. So if you buy a piece of content or a piece of ringtone or a piece of an OTT or anything, it even today I see in India, and there is a very heavy level of bundling that happens. But when you do that bundling, most of these bundlings are kind of free giveaways, the first year subscription fee or for 6 month subscription fee, and so on and so forth, which is a good way to adapt new users. But then you are hoping and praying in that model that you spray paint the country, let's say 100 million people in a certain block, and you expect to retain maybe 5%, 10% of those guys as paid users when you go. So price becomes very sensitive, right? I mean, look at for example, let's look at one organization or two organizations. Let's say look at Netflix or a Prime, which traveled all over the world, right? They have operations all over the world, and the price range is not very far away from each other. I mean, what a Netflix costs in US versus what it costs in India or Singapore or somewhere else is not very far away from each other. But for some countries or some markets, it's very expensive as a service. I mean, it's more expensive than the cable TV is. In some countries, it's like 1/3 of the TV cost is why people actually take it. So how do you see that? How do you answer that question? That do you want to become create a parity across the system, or what do you see? How do you feel that?
You have to be you have to retain parity with local price point, right? If the cable TV and your price point are way off, then there's certainly a problem, right? So how do you price in certain geographies? You benchmark and understand what people pay in that geography for access to content, and then you rationally place according to the appetite of this particular geography where my price point should lie. If that marker is off, then obviously you're going to have trouble acquiring users. And even if you acquire users, they will identify ways to proxy and get out of that country's jail and buy things at a cheaper price point.
Yeah. Okay. Anusik, what's your thought in this?
I absolutely agree with all the panelists. Yeah, SWOT is we can say a tradition right now for our industry. AWOD, I can say that it can be built, but only in the developed area or a developed market, as Andreas said. So I absolutely agree with them that SWOT is a very easy way to pitch on the market or sustain in the market. Whereas if we go for AWOD, actually both of them we need to depend on. But AWOD it's a bit difficult than this.
Okay. So while I'm at it with you, let me ask another very commonly debated sensitive question, which all of us as OTT players have to deal with in some way or the other. Which is about how much of information do you take from your customer and what do you give back to them? I mean, do you really need that information to give it back to them something as a value return, which is called personalization or recommendation or understanding your behavior to help you find you better content and so on and so forth. In our case, when we launched first with it was free service because it was AWOD. So we were not asking anyways, we did not needed to ask any details about credit cards or names and stuff like that. And then after, 6 months, we even dropped the registration. We just started tagging people based on IPs and device IDs and all of that. And we became nameless. So in our case, forever, we have been nameless. Which is why we don't have to worry about compliance with GDPR and so many other things, because we've never stored anybody's data. The only thing we did was we told customers that based on whatever intelligence we could draw from the customer, based on the location, device, what they're watching, when they're watching, how they're watching, and so on, we are being able to perceive a certain information. And we don't need to go beyond that, so pay us based on that. And we are ad-driven model, which is why it becomes more difficult because the brands keep becoming more and more hungry. They would even want to know which side of the bed did you sleep in the night before they start giving you money for that customer to be shown that ad, right? I mean, they'll keep, but there is a time that you'll have to draw a line saying, no, I know you're giving me money, but I can't ask for more information from my customer because it's beyond justice, right? So what do you think is, how much do you want and what do you give back and what do you think is right?
Is the question to me?
Yes, Anusik.
Yeah. I think getting personalized or getting engaged with the customers in this kind of thing is basically what we can say to just keep an hook to sustain in and keep the, especially as what if you say keep a hook to sustaining, especially respective market. It depends on what market you're playing for and what market you're running in. So as compared to, if I take a example of India, yeah, definitely, if we go personalize with the customers over there, yeah, it will work on. And it is, I can say that, yeah, if we go with all the compliances, it is the conventional thing to go with it. I agree with it.
Okay. Lokesh, what about you?
To take as much as possible works in certain cases if you want to be very, very greedy. But obviously, now there is a lot of regulatory oversight that's coming in. People cannot blatantly tag and identify somebody by default. So yeah, the compliance for various geographies now are requiring us to be very prudent on part of what we are picking from user and what we are storing and for how long we are storing. So adhering to local laws in itself requires us to become more and more clear about where do we draw our boundaries.
And there are countries which are up there on privacy laws, and there are countries who are not up there as yet on privacy laws. Do you think what should the OTT as an industry draw a line? I mean, should we go and exploit that loophole and take the juice out of the whole customer base? And when law comes tomorrow, we still have the information. The law was created yesterday, but I have collected my information day for yesterday. So I still have access to that information. Where does that happen? I mean, you will start collecting.
Most of these laws require you to ensure that whatever you have collected is in the purview of the current set, right?
Yeah, but you've juiced out what you needed, right? You already know the information. Your machine learning has learned the model. You don't need the data sets anymore. It will continue to run, right?
So no comments there.
Okay. Andreas, what's your thought? I mean, do we, and by the way, Lokesh, it was not specifically for you. I was talking in general, I mean, as an OTT industry, because while there are people like Facebook who juice it out to the max, but the blunt is faced by most of us who are not taking so much of data. We are hardly taking any data in reality, I would say. We're not going into the deep depth of user behavior in reality. Andreas, what is your thought?
Yeah, so I think it's a really interesting question, and it's for the reason that, and again, it matters whether you are a AVOD service or an SVOD service.
Yeah.
Because as an SVOD service, we don't need to talk to advertisers and say, hey, here's these great documentaries, what you want to advertise on, because we don't need to communicate. So it's, I think, already very different if you're running an AVOD arm or not. We actually, for instance, went the opposite direction. We used to ask for phone numbers to do an SMS verification at sign up, and just took that out. A, for privacy reasons, B, also friction. We thought it's not necessary. We used to ask for first name and surname for credit card reasons. Now we just ask for your first name. Again, because we don't need your surname. We want this person because we send weekly newsletters on here are the great new documentaries to watch, etc. So that for that reason, it's good to at least have a name rather than it being completely anonymous. But beyond that, you have so much information at your fingertips from all your growth channels of, who your audience consists of and how they engage with you, and convert that to, ask lots of information of your own. Maybe you can do some surveys and people can react or not if they want, and you can give them a reward if they do. And we do that as well. And we to call our customers as well for real, one-on-one, 2-3 minute feedback and so on. But that's all a little bit different to very greedily, sucking information, which I understand. If you're running an ad business, there is a fine line to be drawn.
Yeah. In fact, I feel while the SVOD does not need a lot of information, but they still by nature of the business get it, because you will get the name, will get the credit card number. Some who do a wall-based payment, they don't get the access to the credit card number, but you get up a lot of information compared to an AVOD guy. But the AVOD guy has to justify the value, has to basically prove it to the customer that I'm asking this information for your own good, for your betterment. Otherwise, I'm going to bombard so much of ads to you that you're not going to like it, or random ads that you might not like it. So there are many ways of curation that's happening. Thomas, we'll do a quick round and then we will move on. We are also running out of time. So what's your thought on the privacy as well as on data, and how do you use data to make things better?
Yeah, well, it's a hard one. I'm a user and someone who's working. I'm on both sides of this coin. I think we've had a very good run on very loose regulation around data for a long time, and now regulation is catching up to technology. Technology will always move faster than regulation, and I think we now need to look a bit more morally or ethically about how we use data and I suppose the data landscape. And I think that is, again, harder with AVOD, and our stakeholders, our users, they're also advertisers. And moving from broadcast to digital with ads, you're exposed. You need to attribute and you need to prove that these segments are being hit. And so if you want those CPMs, if you want that revenue, you need the data.
Yeah.
So how do you do that in a way which gives people visibility and control? That becomes a test, a big experiment. Apple's doing it right now with their changes. And I bet everyone's saying, do not track. So I don't know, but I think that then ties into how we need to be nimble from a business model perspective and not lock ourselves in too much.
Okay. That's great. I think we've had a great insight with all of us sharing our own experiences and our own thoughts. Thank you so much, guys, for coming over. Bhavana, if you have anybody with any questions, we are great to answer. Otherwise, we are good to go. I know we've already taken more time than we were allocated. Thanks, everybody. It was a pleasure having a panel with you guys. Over to you.
Thank you. So, well, we don't have right now any audience questions, but Shabir, the conversation was so interesting. I'd really like you being the moderator, and firstly, thank you and kudos to you for moderating it so wonderfully, and thank you to all our eminent panelists. We just request you, Shabir, your final thoughts, on conclusion of the panel. I'd like to give that to you so that we can conclude and we can move on to the next one.
Sure. I mean, if I try to juice out what all we discussed today, I mean, we discussed about content versus technology. We discussed about how do you monetize, whether AVOD or SVOD, which are both challenging. We also looked at this is something that I am sure all of us have experienced, but I'll say it on behalf of everybody. There is also a parallel piracy industry, right, which is obviously dying slowly, but it was gigantic a few years back. I mean, 15 years back, pretty much we were 1% and the 99% was pirated world. Now that pirated world has gone down to about 10%, and rest of it is 90% is all of us, which are trying to nibble into each other's shares in some way. But I think we've learned a lot from the pirated industry. I mean, one, pirated industry never copies or takes a content and pirates a content which is not worth it. So the best way to identify which is a good content or a bad content is look into the pirated world. Second is they also are very innovative in technology. I mean, they always keep looking for cheap ways to do things, right? Because they don't want to spend money, unlike us who invest a lot in technology and then do that. So for them, it is cheap technology, free content, and that's how they make money. So our real war has been with those guys as OTT platforms. It's not between us because we are still sharing a small pie. But I think it's come a long way, and with help of technology, with help of good content creators, which has also become more democratized now. I think it's the era is for OTT guys. TV is, anyways, in our minds. I'm sure all of us will agree. TV is already gone. It's the OTT which is the future of the content industry.
And I'm sure all our eminent panelists would agree to that the OTT being the future And I now request all our eminent panelists with this a big, big thank you from our side. And thank you for joining us today at the World OTT Show.